For centuries, a six-pointed star has shimmered through the mists of history, whispering secrets no one could fully decipher. Some know it as the Star of David, others as the Seal of Solomon, and still others as the Star of Remphan, names that carry centuries of devotion, mystery, and forbidden lore. Yet, behind its simple geometry lies a story that transcends religion, crossing continents and belief systems. What if the star that today waves on a flag was once a key in the hands of magicians, philosophers, and kings? What if the truth of its origin is not divine simplicity, but a complex weave of cultures that dared to reach for the heavens? The Star of David, two interlocking triangles forming a perfect hexagram, seems deceptively simple. But simplicity is often the cloak of the profound. Its angles mirror the balance between the earthly and the divine, the masculine and the feminine, fire and water, body and soul. Long before it became a religious emblem, it was a sacred cipher, a geometric whisper echoing through temples, manuscripts, and amulets. Like all powerful symbols, it speaks a universal language of mystery, recognized instinctively across civilizations that never met yet somehow dreamed the same sacred shapes. To understand its journey, one must travel far beyond Jerusalem's golden stones, to the forgotten corners of ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, and India, where geometry was not mathematics but prayer. Here, the hexagram appeared as a cosmic diagram of harmony, symbolizing the union of opposites and the eternal dance between creation and destruction. Sages once drew it in sand before invoking divine energies. Alchemists carved it on vessels to capture celestial power, and mystics traced it upon their hearts to seek protection from unseen forces. Before the Star of David belonged to any faith, it belonged to the language of the universe. But history has a way of reshaping meaning. By the time the Israelites emerged as a people wandering through deserts and destiny, the star already existed in neighboring cultures. The Bible never once mentions a Star of David. Instead, it warns against the star of your God, the Star of Remphan, an image condemned by the prophet Amos as a mark of idolatry. Some scholars argue that this very passage hints at the same six-pointed symbol, suggesting that what is revered today may have once been rebuked as heresy. Such paradoxes are what give the symbol its haunting power. It is both sacred and profane, divine and dangerous. When King David rose to prominence, legends say his warriors carried shields engraved not merely with his name, but with a shape, a sacred pattern forged from the very letters of David in the ancient Phoenician script. Those angular characters, two deltas mirrored against each other, formed the prototype of the hexagram. To his people, it was more than art. It was a divine shield. To his enemies, it was an omen. And thus, the Magen David, meaning Shield of David, was born, not as a star in the sky, but as a talisman on the battlefield, a symbol of divine protection against unseen darkness. Yet the same shape soon took on a second name, the Seal of Solomon. Solomon, David's son, was no mere king. He was a seeker of wisdom, said to command the winds, the beasts, and even the spirits that dwell between worlds. According to mystic lore, his ring bore the same six-pointed star, granting him dominion over demons and angels alike. The Seal of Solomon became the symbol of ultimate knowledge, the bridge between heaven's light and the shadows of forbidden understanding. In medieval grimoires, it would later appear as an instrument of power, an emblem drawn to summon, bind, or protect. But as centuries passed, what was once the mark of kings became the mark of mystics. The early Jewish alchemists of Alexandria and Spain found in the hexagram a hidden equation, one triangle reaching upward, the other downward, symbolizing the merging of divine and human energies. In their eyes, the star was not a mere badge of identity, but a cosmic formula, the reconciliation of opposites. It represented fire meeting water, heaven kissing earth, the soul touching matter. This was no mere decoration, it was a map of the universe, encoded in geometry. By the Middle Ages, Jewish mystics, especially those of the Kabbalistic schools, saw in the hexagram the structure of divine creation itself. Each point, they believed, corresponded to a spiritual emanation, a sephira, in the tree of life. To meditate upon the Star of David was to trace the very flow of divine energy from the unknowable crown to the material world below. Thus, the star became a symbol of unity, a reminder that all things, good and evil, light and dark, originate from a single divine source. Its meaning deepened, its mystery multiplied. And yet, this same symbol was never exclusively Jewish. The early Christian cathedrals of Galilee bore hexagrams carved into their stones. Islamic mystics used it in amulets and talismans, calling it the Seal of Solomon, an emblem of divine authority and spiritual protection. Even Hindu yantras contain similar interlaced triangles, representing the eternal embrace of Shiva and Shakti. The same star appeared in magic, in art, in astronomy, in alchemy. It was everywhere, and nowhere owned it. That universality may be its greatest mystery, how a single geometric form could speak to every faith and none. But the star's story does not end in mysticism or myth. It is also a story of suffering and survival. From ancient temples to medieval manuscripts, from magic to persecution, it journeyed across millennia before finally finding its modern home on the flag of Israel. How did a shape once tied to esoteric secrecy become the symbol of an entire people's identity? How did a mystical seal become an emblem of national pride and tragedy? The path that leads from Solomon's ring to the Star of David's blue stripes is one paved with mystery, exile, and rebirth, a path we now begin to walk. To trace the star's roots, we must step back into the sands of antiquity, long before kings and prophets gave it names. Archaeologists have uncovered hexagrams on pottery shards from Mesopotamia, engraved stones from India, and temple floors in Egypt. These were not random ornaments, but deliberate marks of cosmic order. The ancients believed the universe was built upon sacred geometry, and the hexagram represented the balance of opposing forces, the union of the seen and the unseen. Even in those prehistoric patterns, one can feel the quiet echo of something eternal, the belief that geometry could speak the language of the gods. In Babylon, where astrology was both science and religion, six-pointed stars appeared beside planetary symbols, possibly representing Saturn, the watcher of time and boundary between worlds. The same motif was found among the Sumerians, who revered the heavens as a divine script written in stars. They believed each shape carried the vibration of a celestial truth. The hexagram, then, was not merely art, it was invocation. Its interlocking triangles captured the essence of duality, light and shadow, creation and destruction, eternity and decay. And through these layers, it whispered an ancient truth: everything divine is mirrored in the mortal. As this shape spread westward, the Egyptians, too, saw in it a reflection of the universe's architecture. Their pyramids mirrored the triangular perfection of heaven and earth meeting at a sacred point. Some scholars believe the interlacing triangles echoed their concept of Ka and Ba, the soul's two aspects, one earthly, one spiritual. In later centuries, Egyptian mysticism would influence the esoteric schools of Greece, where the hexagram evolved into a mathematical ideal, a symbol of divine proportion and eternal symmetry. From these civilizations, the symbol began its long, winding journey toward the land that would one day call it the Shield of David. By the time it reached Canaan, the region was a crucible of faiths and symbols. The Israelites, living among Phoenicians and other ancient peoples, were surrounded by sacred shapes, circles, pentagrams, and stars. The Bible's silence about the six-pointed star does not mean ignorance. Rather, it suggests avoidance. For to the prophets, geometric charms were often viewed as gateways to idolatry. The prophet Amos condemned those who carried the star of your god, Remphan, equating it with rebellion against the divine. The same star, centuries later, would resurface under a different name, now hailed as holy rather than heretical. Thus begins the paradox of the hexagram, condemned as a false idol, yet destined to become a sacred emblem. Legends claim that when King David prepared for battle, his blacksmith sought to honor him by inscribing his name upon shields and armor. But language in those days was not just a means of communication, it was a form of creation. The Phoenician letters of David, two dalets enclosing a single vav, formed two intersecting triangles. The result was both accidental and miraculous. What began as a warrior's mark became an icon of divine protection. To his soldiers, it was not geometry, but faith etched in metal, a shape that promised victory because it carried their king's spirit. Thus, from the fires of war was born a symbol that would outlast empires. Solomon, David's heir, inherited not only a kingdom, but the thirst for understanding. He built temples that touched the clouds and studied mysteries that lay beneath the earth. Tradition says he possessed a ring engraved with the same six-pointed seal, a gift from heaven that allowed him to speak the language of spirits. This ring, the Seal of Solomon, became legendary, said to command demons, cure illness, and open gates between realms. In Islamic and Jewish mysticism alike, the symbol transformed into a sign of divine authority. What had been a king's mark of courage became the emblem of hidden wisdom. But wisdom is a dangerous light. It attracts both seekers and shadows. As centuries passed, magicians, alchemists, and scholars began to see the Seal of Solomon not only as a holy mark, but as a magical key. In medieval manuscripts, the hexagram appeared beside incantations and planetary sigils. Some said it could summon angels of light. Others whispered that it bound darker entities. The church and the synagogues viewed it with suspicion, fearing what it might unlock. Yet despite persecution, the symbol endured, drawn secretly on parchment, carved on amulets, hidden in art. It had become more than faith. It was forbidden knowledge disguised as beauty. By the early Middle Ages, the hexagram began appearing in Jewish mystical texts known as the Sefer Raziel Hamalach and Sefer HaZohar. Within these sacred writings, it was no longer merely a shape but a map of divine energy. Each triangle represented a flow between the heavens and the earth, the upper triangle reaching toward God, the lower opening toward humanity. Together they formed a bridge, a cosmic dialogue between creation and creator. To meditate upon the star was to align one's soul with the rhythm of existence, to perceive that all dualities, male and female, spirit and matter, mercy and judgment, are but two halves of the same eternal unity. Outside the walls of the Jewish academies, the symbol was evolving too. In Christian cathedrals, stonemasons carved the hexagram beside the cross, believing it represented divine harmony. In Islamic art, it adorned mosques and talismans as the Khatam Suleiman, the Seal of Solomon. Sufi mystics saw in it the perfection of divine love, two triangles eternally intertwined, each dependent upon the other. The universality of the hexagram became undeniable. Every faith saw its own reflection in it. The Jews found protection, the Muslims saw wisdom, the Christians discerned harmony, and the mystics saw the breath of the cosmos itself. But symbols live through stories, and stories are shaped by the times that tell them. What was once a sacred geometry soon faced suspicion, persecution, and reinterpretation. The world was changing, empires fell, faiths fractured, and the hexagram drifted from temple to tomb, from scroll to flag. Each era left its mark upon it, bending its meaning, adding layers of myth and memory. Yet the star endured, untouched at its core. Like truth itself, it could not be destroyed, only rediscovered. And somewhere between the whisper of the past and the echo of eternity, the Star of David waited for the world to remember what it truly meant. The Middle Ages were an age of shadows and light, a time when faith and fear walked hand in hand. It was in this fragile balance that the Star of David began to take on its mystical form. In Spain, where Jewish, Christian, and Islamic scholars exchanged ideas in secret libraries and candlelit halls, the language of Kabbalah was born. The hexagram found new life within its sacred diagrams, becoming a symbol of the Sephirot, the 10 divine emanations that bridge the infinite and the finite. For the mystics, the star was no longer merely a geometric design, but a living reflection of divine structure itself. They called it Magen David, the shield of David, and to them it represented the human soul's yearning for union with the Creator. One triangle pointed upward, symbolizing the mortal's ascent toward God. The other pointed downward, signifying the descent of divine wisdom into the human heart. When the two met, they formed a perfect balance, heaven touching earth. To meditate on the star was to stand at the meeting point of worlds, where every breath echoed the pulse of creation. Each angle, each intersection, was a sacred letter written into the blueprint of existence. In the hidden writings of the Kabbalists, the star glowed with new meaning. Angs. The upper triangle became the world of divine mercy, the lower triangle the realm of divine judgment. Together they formed the equilibrium of the cosmos. The 6 points represented the 6 directions of space: north, south, east, west, up, and down, while the center symbolized the unshakable presence of God dwelling in all things. In this geometry, the mystics saw not only the map of the universe, but the mirror of the soul. To understand the star was to understand the divine order itself. As Jewish mysticism flourished, the hexagram became a tool of prayer and meditation. In whispered rituals, rabbis drew it upon parchment before invoking the sacred names of God. In their eyes, it was more than a symbol. It was a seal of protection against chaos. Amulets engraved with the star were carried by travelers crossing deserts and seas, inscribed with verses from the Psalms, believed to shield their bearers from misfortune. The star's 6 points reached out like divine arms, guarding every direction of existence. Within its geometry lay the silent promise: you are surrounded by light, even in the darkest of nights. In the medieval cities of Spain, where tolerance flickered like a fragile flame, the symbol began to spread beyond religious borders. Muslim scholars, steeped in Sufism, recognized in it the seal of Solomon, a sign of wisdom and harmony between man and God. Christian philosophers found in its perfection a reflection of divine balance, incorporating it into cathedral mosaics and sacred manuscripts. The star became a universal key to the mysteries of creation, bridging faiths that often clashed in doctrine but converged in wonder. Beneath its angles, the divisions of religion dissolved, if only for a moment. But not all who saw the star understood its light. Some feared it. As medieval Europe sank into superstition and suspicion, anything connected to ancient magic or Jewish learning became a target of persecution. The hexagram, once carved proudly on synagogues, was now whispered about in the dark, called a witch's mark or a sorcerer's seal. Yet the deeper its meaning was buried, the stronger its mystery grew. For those who clung to faith, the star became a quiet rebellion, a sign that divine truth could never be erased, no matter how many times history tried. In those same centuries, Jewish communities carried the symbol with them across Europe, etched into prayer books and tombstones, embroidered on garments worn in secret. The Magen David became a quiet companion to a wandering people, a reminder of divine protection when kingdoms turned hostile. To the persecuted, it was both memory and hope. Every point of the star seemed to whisper, "Endure." For as long as the star endures, so too will those who bear it. It became the geometry of resilience, the silent heartbeat of a faith that refused to fade. By the 13th century, the Kabbalistic teachings of Spain began to spread eastward, to Poland, Lithuania, and the heart of Eastern Europe. There, mystics and rabbis saw the hexagram as the ultimate symbol of God's unity within multiplicity. It was inscribed in the Zohar, the sacred text that illuminated Jewish mysticism for centuries. Within its pages, the 6 points were said to represent the 6 emotional attributes of God: kindness, strength, beauty, endurance, splendor, and foundation, united in the center point of divine sovereignty. The star was no longer just a sign, it was the pattern of God's own heartbeat. Even as wars raged and empires rose and fell, the star remained a constant, an unbroken thread connecting generations. In the ghettos and study halls, Ren learned its meaning before they learned their letters. In the candlelight of Sabbath evenings, mothers traced it in the air above their children's heads as a blessing. It was protection, it was identity, it was memory. And though its origins stretched across pagan, mystical, and royal histories, for the Jewish people, it had become something more, a symbol of their covenant with endurance itself. But destiny is never content with peace. The same symbol that had comforted and protected would soon be tested by fire once more. As Europe moved toward the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, the hexagram began to step out of the shadows of mysticism and into the light of identity. It would be carved on synagogue doors, printed on manuscripts, and sewn into the flags of communities that longed for recognition. Yet with every rebirth came new questions. Was it truly the Star of David, the seal of Solomon, or something far older? The world would soon decide, but not without cost. The Renaissance was more than a rebirth of art and reason. It was a resurrection of ancient memory. As Europe awakened from the long night of the Middle Ages, curiosity became a sacred fire. Scholars dug into forgotten tomes, alchemists whispered of divine geometry, and mystics spoke again of symbols older than Scripture itself. Among these rediscovered emblems, the six-pointed star began to shimmer anew. It appeared not as mere ornamentation, but as a cipher, a secret bridge between heaven and man, science and faith, number and soul. The world was changing, and the star that had once hidden in the shadows of mystics now stepped into the light of civilization. In this age of exploration and enlightenment, the Magen David found a new voice among Jewish communities who had endured centuries of exile. It began to crown the gates of synagogues in Europe, from Prague to Krakow, from Venice to Amsterdam, marking houses of worship with quiet pride. To those who carved it into stone, the symbol was not a relic, but a revelation, a promise that their people's spirit would endure beyond every border, every exile, every persecution. It was a geometric covenant, 6 points of endurance bound by a center of faith. Beneath its symmetry, the scattered found belonging. While philosophers debated the mechanics of the cosmos, Jewish mystics saw in the hexagram something eternal. The stars' twin triangles mirrored creation's rhythm, one rising, one descending, each dependent upon the other. In the merging of those opposites lay divine equilibrium. To contemplate it was to witness God's breath in motion, the upward aspiration of humankind met by the downward grace of the divine. This union, symbolized so elegantly in 6 lines, became a language of harmony that transcended theology. In every faith, geometry spoke where words failed. Prague became the star's most luminous stage. Within its labyrinth of cobbled streets, alchemists, rabbis, and astronomers shared ideas that blurred the line between science and spirit. Here lived the legendary Rabbi Judah Lo ben Bezalel, the Maharal of Prague, who taught that the Magen David represented the eternal balance of the universe. To his disciples, it was more than a symbol, it was the key to understanding God's creation. Around the same time, tales of the golem began to emerge, a creature shaped from clay and animated by sacred letters, its heart marked by the same 6-pointed seal. In these legends, the star was no mere geometry. It was the breath of life itself. In 1354, history etched a turning point when Emperor Charles IV granted the Jews of Prague the right to bear a flag. Upon it gleamed a golden 6-pointed star against a crimson field, the first time the hexagram became the official emblem of a Jewish community. For a people long denied homeland and heraldry, this flag was more than cloth. It was a statement of existence. The Magen David now fluttered in public air, a signal to the world that faith and identity could no longer be confined to the shadows. What was once secret had become sovereign. The Renaissance spirit spread this rebirth across Europe. Jewish artisans engraved the star into manuscripts, while merchants carved it into the handles of trade chests that crossed oceans. In Venice, it adorned synagogue domes that rivaled cathedrals. In Poland, it glowed in stained glass. Each community gave it new shades of meaning. For some, it was divine protection. For others, a code of unity. Beneath the changing skies of Europe, the Magen David became the Jewish heartbeat, a silent declaration that despite exile, they remained whole. Its geometry, once mystical, now pulsed with identity. The Kabbalists of Saft and Eastern Europe further deepened its sacred interpretation. Under the guidance of the great Isaac Luria, the star became a symbol of the universe's contraction and expansion, God's own breathing. One triangle represented divine emanation, the other the vessel of creation. Between them lay the shattered fragments of existence that humanity was destined to repair. In this cosmic drama, the Magen David was not static. It was alive, dynamic, forever in motion. Every line was a path, every point a spark of divine energy. To draw it was to participate in the act of creation itself. As Europe entered the Enlightenment, reason and revelation began to dance together. The star that once adorned secret manuscripts now appeared openly in cities filled with philosophers and reformers. It was engraved upon synagogue portals, etched into gravestones, printed on texts, and woven into cloth. To the modern eye, it was no longer an amulet of magic, but a crest of cultural pride. For a people striving to define themselves in a rational age, the star became their emblem of continuity, a sacred past woven into the bright fabric of modern thought. It was both ancient and new, both mystical and enlightened. But even in light, darkness lingers. The visibility of the Magen David brought admiration from some and hatred from others. In the whispers of the ignorant, it was called the mark of sorcery, the sign of conspiracies imagined by fearful minds. Where once it symbolized protection, it now invited persecution. The same geometry that had guarded prophets and scholars began to appear in twisted narratives of prejudice. Yet, even then, the Jewish people refused to abandon it. The star had carried them through exile, and it would carry them through slander. Its strength lay not in approval, but in endurance. Through every century, every exile, every false accusation, the star endured because its meaning transcended circumstance. It was the shape of survival. It had been drawn in blood and light, carved in wood and stone, whispered in prayer and defiance. Empires had fallen beneath it, yet it remained unchanged. As Europe prepared to step into the modern age, the Magen David stood poised between glory and grief, between revelation and ruin. Soon, it would rise higher than ever before, etched into banners of hope, printed on passports of return. And yet it would also descend into history's darkest night. The star's next chapter would test the very endurance it had come to represent. The 19th century dawned with the trembling pulse of revolution. Empires shifted, machines roared, and old beliefs yielded to the promise of progress. Yet for the Jewish people, the ache of displacement still lingered. In the ghettos of Europe, beneath the chiming of church bells and the cries of marketplaces, the Magen David endured as a quiet companion, a geometric prayer etched into doorframes and stitched into garments. It was no longer the secret sigil of mystics, but the emblem of a people seeking recognition in a world that had forgotten their name. The star waited patiently, like falsehood. If itself for the moment, destiny would call it forth again. As Enlightenment ideals swept through Europe, many Jews began stepping out from centuries of isolation, seeking to participate fully in civic life. New synagogues rose across cities, built not as hidden sanctuaries, but as architectural declarations of belonging. At their pinnacles gleamed the six-pointed star, catching the light like a promise. The Magen David had become a mark of dignity, no longer only a shield of spiritual protection, but a badge of cultural identity. It spoke silently to those who passed beneath it. We are still here. Every glimmer of that star was both a memory and a proclamation. By the mid-1800s, the hexagram had become inseparable from the Jewish spirit. It appeared in prayer books, community flags, and the seals of Jewish organizations. Across Europe, the star was no longer confined to mystical speculation. It had entered the vocabulary of everyday faith. Rabbis began using it as a unifying emblem, a symbol that transcended denominational lines between Orthodox and Reform, between mystic and modern. Its meaning deepened not through theology, but through endurance. Each generation poured its own story into its 6 points: hope, suffering, exile, return, memory, and faith. The Magen David had become the very geometry of the Jewish soul. In 1897, destiny caught fire in the city of Basel. There, at the First Zionist Congress, led by the visionary Theodor Herzl, a scattered people began to dream of nationhood once again. The delegates debated, argued, and prayed beneath banners bearing the ancient star. Out of countless possibilities, it was the Magen David that emerged as the unifying symbol of the Zionist movement. To those gathered, it represented not only ancient lineage, but a promise of renewal. A star that had guided them through exile would now lead them home. Its geometry no longer belonged to mystics or monarchs. It belonged to the rebirth of a nation. The choice of the star was not arbitrary. It was deliberate, layered with history and hope. Other symbols were proposed, the menorah, the Lion of Judah, but the Magen David carried a resonance that no other could match. It was familiar yet transcendent, sacred yet inclusive. It spoke of survival, of unity, of light that endured even in darkness. For centuries, it had protected individuals. Now it would protect a people. From Basel onward, the 6-pointed star became more than a religious emblem. It became the banner of Jewish self-determination. It was the geometry of identity rising to reclaim its place in history. As Zionist movements spread across Europe and beyond, the star adorned flags, medallions, and community halls. It became a global emblem of belonging for Jews who had never met, but shared the same longing for home. In synagogues from Warsaw to New York, it was painted on ceilings, embroidered on Torah covers, and engraved on gates. The Magen David had transcended geography. It was now the symbol of a people without borders. Every ray of its shape reached across oceans, whispering the same message: Am Yisrael Chai. The people of Israel live. Yet history, ever the mirror of contradiction, soon turned that light into shadow. As the 20th century emerged, dark ideologies began to twist ancient symbols into weapons of hate. In Germany, where the star once adorned peaceful neighborhoods, it was soon sewn into fabric under orders of tyranny. The same Magen David that had symbolized unity and protection was now colored yellow and branded as shame. The Nazis forced every Jew to wear it, transforming pride into persecution, faith into a target. But what they could not understand was that the star they tried to degrade had already survived empires. Its light could be dimmed, never destroyed. Behind the walls of ghettos, within the horror of camps, the star burned quietly in the hearts of those who wore it. Mothers whispered its meaning to children, telling them it was not a badge of disgrace but of courage, that it stood for every ancestor who refused to vanish. In that darkness, the Magen David became defiance itself. It shimmered on scraps of cloth, on hidden drawings, in whispered prayers. Even as ashes rose to the sky, the star remained a silent witness, marking not the shame of a people, but the cruelty of those who feared their endurance. It had seen persecution before, but never so vast, never so cruel. When the war ended and the ashes settled, survivors emerged carrying little but memory. Yet among those memories was the star, the same one worn in hate, now reborn in defiance. To wear it again was to reclaim it, to declare that it had never belonged to the oppressor. From despair rose determination, and from exile, rebirth. The Magen David became the soul's phoenix, rising from the ruins of Auschwitz and Treblinka, carrying with it the stories of millions. When the State of Israel was declared in 1948, it was not merely politics, it was prophecy fulfilled. And at the center of its flag, shining against blue and white, was the star that had followed them through every exile, every fire, every dream. When the flag of Israel first lifted in the wind, the world witnessed a cycle complete. The same symbol that once adorned ancient temples and mystical scrolls, the same star that kings, prophets, and wanderers carried through ages of trial, now flew over a sovereign nation. It was as if history itself had drawn a perfect circle, the geometry of faith returning to its origin. But the Magen David was not a symbol of triumph alone. It carried within it the memory of suffering, the shadows of the past, the promise of endurance. It was not a mark of power, but of perseverance, a light that had learned to shine through sore row. Its 6 points reached not only upward to heaven, but outward to humanity, reminding the world that even in ruin, there is resurrection. The wind that carried the blue and white flag of Israel across the deserts of 1948 carried more than fabric. It carried centuries of longing. The Magen David, shining proudly in its center, became the pulse of a reborn people. Its 2 triangles spoke to the duality of Jewish existence, suffering and survival, exile and return, memory and rebirth. The world saw a nation restored, but to those who had borne the mark in silence, it was far more than political triumph. It was the living testimony that faith, no matter how crushed, always finds a way to rise. The geometry of God's covenant had become the geometry of resilience. Yet the rebirth of Israel did not end the star's journey. It began a new one. For the first time in millennia, a people had reclaimed a symbol and a homeland in the same breath. But with sovereignty came complexity. The Magen David was no longer just a spiritual emblem. It was now a national one. It adorned uniforms, currency, and state seals, carrying the weight of modern identity. To many, it was the heart of Jewish renewal. To others, it became the focal point of political struggle. The same symbol that had once united exiles now stood at the crossroads of history, hailed, debated, and sometimes defied. The decades that followed were filled with triumph and turmoil. Wars were fought under the shadow of the star. Peace treaties were signed beneath its light. It fluttered on tanks and temples alike, carved into monuments and etched into the hearts of those who defended the fragile dream of a homeland. Every victory and every loss became part of its story. The Magen David had moved from mysticism to history, from persecution to power. Yet in every moment of conflict, it reminded the world that the same symbol once stitched in yellow for shame now flew in blue for freedom. Beyond Israel's borders, the star continued its global evolution. Jewish sea. Communities across continents embraced it anew, from America's bustling cities to the quiet corners of Europe still haunted by ghosts. It gleamed atop synagogues, hung on necklaces, and graced the covers of sacred texts. But for many, it was not just a symbol of Israel. It was a symbol of Jewish identity everywhere, the connective thread that tied the diaspora to the homeland and the past to the present. Wherever a Magen David was seen, it whispered the same silent truth: you are part of something that never died. In the decades after the Holocaust, artists and philosophers began to reinterpret the star through the lens of memory. Painters drew it fractured. Poets described it as a window cracked but unbroken. Musicians composed hymns that spoke its geometry and sound. For survivors, it was both a wound and a healing scar, proof that endurance is its own kind of victory. The 6 points came to represent not only faith but remembrance. 6 million lives extinguished, 6 corners of the earth where survivors rebuilt, 6 unbreakable lines that formed a whole. The Magen David was not just faith restored, it was grief transformed into strength. But symbols live not in stone or flag, they live in hearts, and hearts by their nature interpret. In the modern age, the Magen David found itself at the intersection of politics and philosophy. To some, it represented national pride. To others, universal morality. Activists raised it in protests. Scholars debated its ancient meanings, and theologians rediscovered its mystic depth. The star had once united mystics and monarchs. Now it united voices of faith, freedom, and justice. Yet, as always, with light came opposition. The same symbol that inspired devotion also drew controversy as critics sought to separate its spiritual heritage from its political form. Still, through every argument, it endured, as unyielding as the people. It represented, in art and culture, the Magen David transcended religion altogether. It appeared in sculpture and cinema, woven into fashion, reflected in architecture. Museums displayed it not only as a relic of faith, but as a timeless icon of endurance and identity. Philosophers called it geometry of meaning, psychologists called it shape of memory, and historians called it the emblem that outlasted empires. From mysticism to modernity, it had carried within its 6 lines the human story itself, the endless struggle between despair and hope, between the finite and the eternal. In interfaith dialogues, the star became a meeting point rather than a boundary. Christian theologians recognized in its geometry the same harmony found in creation stories. Muslim scholars acknowledged its echo in the Seal of Solomon. It became a reminder that truth wears many shapes, but one essence. Across religions, the Magen David symbolized unity in diversity, the ancient idea that divinity speaks through all forms. Though born in Jewish hands, it had become a universal symbol of spiritual architecture, a pattern that whispers of balance wherever eyes are open enough to see. Yet even as it spread across cultures, the star retained its sacred intimacy. Within Jewish homes, it still hung near doorways and around necks, a quiet assurance that protection was never far. It adorned wedding rings and Torah crowns, candle holders and children's drawings. Every generation gave it new meaning without breaking the old. In its simplicity lay infinite possibility, a reminder that symbols, like souls, evolve but never die. The Magen David had survived exile, magic, mysticism, and genocide. It had been a shield, a stigma, and a sign of salvation. And through all transformations, it remained what it had always been, a light that refused to fade. Now, as the world stares once more into uncertainty, the Star of David shines with a quiet steadiness that transcends politics, creed, and conflict. It is not only a symbol of a people, but of persistence itself. Its interlocking triangles still whisper of heaven meeting earth, of strength balanced by compassion, of endurance crowned by hope. It reminds the world that what is most sacred cannot be destroyed. It can only be rediscovered. For as long as the Magen David gleams upon the flag, upon the heart, and upon the sky, it will stand as the eternal geometry of survival, a star forged from faith and fire, forever unbroken, forever alive. The 20th century may have witnessed the rebirth of a nation, but the 21st is witnessing the rebirth of spirit. The Magen David, once a symbol carved into shields and flags, has become a symbol etched into consciousness itself. In an age of science and skepticism, it continues to whisper a truth that reason alone cannot explain, that geometry, when sacred, becomes language. Across the world, seekers from all paths, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, and even secular mystics, have begun to rediscover the star not only as a cultural icon, but as a map of meaning. It is no longer bound to a single people. It has become a compass for the human soul, seeking harmony in chaos. The rise of global connectivity has made ancient symbols newly alive. On screens and temples alike, the Magen David glows beside mandalas, crosses, and crescents, forming a visual conversation of faiths. Spiritual teachers speak of it as the geometry of balance, a pattern reminding humanity of the need to reunite heaven and earth within the self. In meditation circles, the star is drawn in light upon the ground, symbolizing the alignment of heart and mind. It is no longer confined to the scrolls of rabbis or the dreams of mystics. It has entered the shared lexicon of spiritual evolution, quietly reasserting its timeless role as bridge between opposites. Within Judaism itself, the star's meaning continues to evolve. For the young generations born in a world after exile, it is not just a badge of ancestry, but a call to purpose. It asks them to remember, not with sorrow, but with strength. It reminds them that survival alone is not enough. One must transform memory into meaning. Modern rabbis speak of the Magen David as a mirror of responsibility, each point representing an aspect of the Jewish duty to repair the world. Tikkun Olam. 6 points, 6 directions, 6 ways to heal the wounds of history. The symbol that once protected has now become the symbol that propels. In Israel, the star's presence breathes through every corner of life, from the national flag fluttering above schools and marketplaces to the mosaics embedded in ancient ruins. Yet beneath its familiarity, it retains a quiet awe. Soldiers wear it as courage, scholars study it as history, and artists shape it as beauty. Its geometry connects generations, ancestors who wandered deserts, prophets who dreamed of unity, and citizens who now live beneath the same star reborn. Even those who challenge its political meaning cannot escape its gravitational pull. For within those two triangles lies a truth larger than any ideology, the eternal dialogue between power and purpose. In synagogues across the world, candles still flicker beneath stained glass windows patterned with the Magen David. Children gaze upward and ask their elders what it means, and in each answer, the star changes slightly, yet remains the same. Some elders speak of King David's shield. Others tell of Solomon's ring and the wisdom it once held. Some whisper of mystic alphabets, others of modern miracles. But to all, it is the same promise, that faith can bend, but not break. The star, like the people who carry it, survives because it adapts. It evolves with every retelling, becoming new while remaining eternal. In the realm of art and philosophy, the Magen David has become the shape of introspection itself. Painters render it fragmented to explore the tension between unity and division. Poets describe it as the pulse of the cosmos, 6 beats echoing through creation. Sculptors build it into monuments that rise toward the sun, casting 6-pointed shadows across the ground, as though even light itself honors its form. Its geometry has inspired modern thinkers to see in it a metaphor for equilibrium, the reminder that no civilization can stand without balance, and no soul can thrive without harmony between its ascending and descending forces. Beyond religion, the star has entered the language of resilience. Humanitarian organizations have adopted it in subtle ways, using its symmetry to represent balance and coexistence. In disaster zones, it appears on medical badges, echoing its ancient purpose as the Shield of David. In literature, it is invoked as a symbol of endurance, appearing in stories of hope written by those who refuse to let the light go out. Even those with no connection to Judaism recognize its essence, a reminder that every line of history can converge into meaning if drawn with faith. The star has become the heartbeat of humanity's shared endurance. As the digital age unfolds, the Magen David continues to transcend the boundaries of time. Scholars use virtual reality to explore its presence in ancient temples and manuscripts. Mathematicians map its geometry to cosmic patterns found in galaxies and atoms alike. The same hexagram that once adorned a shepherd's shield now mirrors the structure of molecules and stars. Science at last begins to echo mysticism's ancient claim, that the same divine order guiding the heavens also lives within us. The star's form, repeated in fractals of creation, proves that its design is not accidental. It is woven into the very code of existence. But perhaps its greatest power lies not in form or function, but in feeling. The Magen David continues to inspire because it carries the emotional weight of centuries, the ache of exile, the wonder of return, the silence of loss, the song of rebirth. It has become the vessel through which an entire civilization has told its story again and again. Each point of the star holds a whisper of that collective memory. It is a language of light spoken without words, a testament that symbols are not merely images, they are living stories written by time itself. And so the star endures, not as a relic, but as a rhythm. Its triangles still intertwine, reflecting the eternal truth that what rises must also descend, that heaven and earth are mirrors of one another. The Magen David continues to pulse through history's heart, reminding humanity that unity is not perfection, but balance. It is the sacred equilibrium between power and humility, between faith and doubt, between the infinite and the fragile. The star's light does not blind, it guides. It does not conquer, it connects. And as long as humanity looks upward in search of meaning, somewhere in the geometry of the cosmos, that six-pointed star will be waiting, glimmering, eternal, whispering. Remember who you are. In the grand silence of the cosmos, where galaxies spin like celestial mandalas, the same pattern reappears. The interlaced triangles, the hidden symmetry, the whisper of the Magen David. Astronomers peer through their telescopes and trace hexagonal storms on Saturn's poles, crystalline shapes in snowflakes, and molecular bonds forming the very fabric of life. It is as if creation itself was built upon this sacred geometry, repeating endlessly across scale and form. What mystics once intuited in candlelight, modern science now reveals in the stars. The universe is not chaos but composition, and the Star of David is its recurring signature, a code that binds light to matter, the infinite to the intimate. For philosophers, this revelation reignited an ancient idea that geometry is the handwriting of the divine. Every triangle, every intersection of the Magen David echoes the balance of existence. The upward point speaks of ascent, of spirits striving toward truth. The downward one answers with descent, of wisdom returning to guide humanity. Together, they form a perpetual dialogue, thesis and antithesis resolved in harmony. The star becomes more than symbol. It becomes equation, embodying the unity of opposites that underpins both theology and physics. Whether one calls it God, cosmos, or consciousness, its pattern whispers the same truth. All things are reflections of one another. The ancients may not have known molecules or galaxies, yet their reverence for this pattern came from an instinctive awareness of order. In every temple stone and sacred text, the hexagram stood as proof that meaning existed beneath mystery. Today, as quantum theory reveals that particles dance in dualities, wave and matter, energy and form, the star's symbolism feels prophetic. It is as if our ancestors carved into stone what science would one day prove with mathematics, that creation itself thrives on polarity. The Magen David, in this light, becomes not only the shield of faith, but the mirror of reality's structure, 6 directions anchored by a single silent center. Mystics of every age have claimed that to understand the star is to understand oneself. The 6 outer points represent the directions of the world, the inner hexagon, the heart. When mind, body, and spirit align within that center, the human being becomes a reflection of divine harmony. In meditation, some visualize the star within the chest, its upper triangle glowing with aspiration, its lower triangle grounding with compassion. Each breath becomes a movement through the star's geometry. Inhale the infinite, exhale the earthly. In this sacred rhythm, the human soul finds its balance between heaven's vastness and the earth's embrace. Artists, too, have long felt the star's gravitational pull. In sacred architecture, its lines are found in cathedrals, mosques, and temples. In music, composers have mirrored its symmetry in chords and harmonic progressions that rise and fall in balanced tension. In literature, it has become the archetype of balance, the hero torn between ambition and humility, the soul poised between destiny and doubt. Whether on canvas or in verse, the Magen David remains the unseen blueprint behind beauty itself. Its geometry is rhythm, its form, a melody frozen in space. Where art seeks perfection, the star provides its compass. In the modern age, where chaos often seems to drown meaning, people have turned again to sacred symbols as anchors of order. The Magen David has emerged as a symbol of grounding in an age of fragmentation. Psychologists interpret its 2 triangles as a metaphor for integration, the union of conscious and unconscious mind. The upward triangle mirrors logic and structure, the downward emotion and intuition. The whole star represents the self fully realized, balanced between reason and feeling, intellect and instinct. Thus, even outside religion, the ancient star continues to heal the human psyche, guiding it back toward wholeness. Among spiritual scientists, the fascination grows deeper. Some see in the star's six-fold symmetry echoes of carbon's atomic structure, the element of life. Others note its appearance in the molecular bonds of water, the substance that sustains all existence. The same geometry that shapes galaxies also shapes the drop of rain that nourishes the earth. It is as if creation whispered one sacred pattern into everything, and the Magen David became its echo. The ancient mystics called it divine correspondence. Today we might call it the fractal nature of reality. What exists above exists below, each reflection leading us closer to understanding the whole. Across the spiritual spectrum, teachers reinterpret the star as a guide for awakening. In yoga and Eastern mysticism, its interlocking triangles mirror the balance of Shiva and Shakti, the eternal dance of creation and destruction. In Sufism, it echoes the union of lover and beloved, the merging of human yearning with divine grace. Even in indigenous wisdom traditions, similar six-fold symbols describe the interconnectedness of all directions and beings. The Magen David stands among them as a universal translator of the sacred, a reminder that truth wears many shapes but always returns to balance. In the quiet minds of the contemplative, the star's beauty lies not in its complexity, but in its simplicity. Two triangles, six lines, one center, and yet within it, infinity unfolds. To gaze upon it is to feel the pulse of the cosmos condensed into a single moment of stillness. It is an image of paradox reconciled, of order emerging from chaos, of faith uniting with understanding. The ancients called it a shield because it protected not only the body but the soul, from ignorance, from division, from forgetting who we are. Its power is not supernatural, it is structural, woven into the fabric of being itself. And perhaps this is why, after thousands of years, the Star of David continues to command awe. It is not merely the emblem of a nation or the relic of a religion, it is a living revelation, a silent teacher reminding humanity of the harmony it has always known but too often forgets. It invites us to look both inward and upward, to see that the divine is not elsewhere but everywhere. The same light that forms stars forms souls. The Magen David endures because it is truth rendered in shape, that all opposites are one, that creation itself is a covenant, and that every life, like every star, is part of a pattern too vast to end. In the modern era, the Magen David finds itself standing between reverence and resistance, a light both celebrated and contested. The world it now illuminates is no longer defined by kingdoms or temples, but by nations, ideologies, and movements that often clash beneath its glow. What was once a spiritual symbol has become a mirror reflecting humanity's divisions. In cities and capitals, the six-pointed star shines proudly atop synagogues and national flags. Yet, in some protests and conflicts, it becomes a point of contention. Like all great symbols, its power lies in its universality, and its universality invites interpretation, devotion, and dispute alike. For many, the star remains the embodiment of Jewish identity, perseverance, and belonging. It is engraved on memorials that honor those lost in the Holocaust, embroidered on prayer shawls worn at weddings and funerals, and tattooed upon the arms of descendants who vow never to forget. Each representation carries a different emotion: grief, pride, remembrance, and defiance. To see the Magen David is to feel the pulse of an entire people who have turned suffering into song and exile into endurance. It stands not only for faith, but for survival, proof that what is sacred can never be erased, no matter how many times history tries. Yet to others, especially in the turbulent landscape of global politics, the star has become burdened with controversy. In regions shadowed by conflict, it is sometimes misused as a political weapon, reduced to an emblem of division rather than unity. Critics, often blind to its ancient depth, see only its modern association with statehood and war. But beneath those debates lies a more profound truth. The star itself is neutral, eternal, beyond politics. It does not speak of conquest or conflict, it speaks of connection. It represents the union of heaven and earth, spirit and matter, heart and mind. The divisions are human, the symbol divine. Artists and thinkers of the 21st century have sought to reclaim that deeper essence. They depict the Magen David fractured and reassembled, luminous and broken, to reflect humanity's struggle to find unity amid chaos. In galleries and digital spaces, its geometry is reimagined as light installations, sculptures, and virtual landscapes. Each interpretation seeks not to redefine the symbol, but to reveal it anew, to show that its 6 points still stretch toward reconciliation. When light passes through glass shaped as the star, it refracts into countless colors, reminding us that truth itself is not singular but spectral, made richer by diversity. In philosophy, the star has become a metaphor for coexistence. Scholars describe its two triangles as the dialogue between belief and reason, tradition and progress, self and other. It offers a model for understanding in an age defined by division. The upward triangle, aspiration, intellect, idealism, meets the downward triangle, compassion, humility, and grounding. Between them lies harmony, the sacred middle ground that humanity so often forgets. To live by the star's pattern is to live in balance, not to abandon conviction, but to temper it with understanding. The world may change, but the geometry of wisdom does not. In interfaith gatherings and peace summits, the Magen David now sits beside crosses, crescents, and wheels of Dharma, part of a shared vocabulary of symbols seeking dialogue instead of division. When rabbis, imams, and priests stand together under its light, it becomes more than an emblem. It becomes a prayer in form. It whispers across religions that holiness is not owned but shared, that the same divine spark that kindled the first stars still burns within every heart. In that unity, the star's purpose is restored. Once a shield, now a bridge. It reflects what the prophets and mystics always knew, that peace is the truest revelation. Still, in the vast digital age, where information and misinformation intertwine, the star remains a battleground of meanings. Online, it can be seen glowing as a symbol of solidarity after tragedy, and elsewhere, twisted by those who misunderstand its sanctity. Yet the endurance of the Magen David lies precisely in its resilience to distortion. It has survived empires, inquisitions, and genocides. It will survive the chaos of algorithms and headlines. Its light cannot be confined to one interpretation, for it was born from the human longing for harmony, a longing that no era can erase. To the spiritually awake, the star now holds a new relevance. It reminds us of the need to reconnect with what is ancient, sacred, and true, in a world obsessed with the transient. In meditation halls and study circles, seekers use the Magen David as a mandala of reflection, a way to find stillness amid noise. Each intersection becomes a point of inquiry. What do I believe? What divides me from others? What unites us all? In these questions, the star fulfills its eternal duty, to draw the human mind back to center, where the divine still speaks softly. Theologians and mystics alike suggest that the star's true endurance comes from its refusal to belong to a single narrative. It embodies both the sacred and the secular, the mystical and the rational. It reminds humanity that divinity exists not above life but within it, that God and geometry are not separate but intertwined. The Magen David thus stands not as a relic of faith, but as a revelation of consciousness. Every time it is drawn, worn, or remembered, it reawakens the soul to its own symmetry, a quiet echo of perfection in an imperfect world. And so, in this century of light and noise, the Star of David continues to shine, not unchallenged, but undefeated. It glows from flags, temples, memorials, and hearts, each instance a testament to survival, balance, and belonging. Its meaning shifts with time, yet never loses its essence. To some, it is history. To others, hope. To many, it is home. And though it may be contested on Earth, in the vast silence of the cosmos it remains pure. 6 radiant points holding the secret of creation, a divine reminder that even amid division, there exists a shape that unites. It endures not because we remember it, but because it remembers us. There are symbols that speak of history, and then there are symbols that speak of eternity. The Magen David belongs to the latter. Its 6 lines and 2 triangles have crossed every border of belief, endured every trial of time, and survived every attempt to define or destroy it. It is older than language, older than nations, older, perhaps, than memory itself. It has been drawn in the dust of ancient temples and carved into the steel of modern monuments. And through it all, it whispers the same truth, that the divine is not distant. It lives in pattern, in proportion, in the harmony between opposites. And humanity, in its longing, keeps returning to that shape as if remembering something it once knew, but forgot. Through every age, the star has asked one question in 1,000 different tongues. What is balance? In a world of chaos and conflict, how do opposites coexist without devouring each other? The upward triangle calls us to rise, to seek, to dream, to transcend the limitations of flesh. The downward triangle invites us to return, to ground, to feel, to love the world as it is. Between them lies the human story, stretched eternally between heaven and earth. Each soul, like the star itself, is a meeting place of those 2 forces. The balance is never perfect, yet it is sacred precisely because it is pursued. The mystics say that when creation began, light shattered into countless fragments, scattering divine essence across the cosmos. Every act of goodness, every word of truth, every moment of compassion gathers those fragments back toward unity. The Magen David, in its geometry, mirrors this sacred restoration, the reunion of what was broken. Each intersection is a point of healing, each triangle a vessel for light. To contemplate the star is to remember that all of existence is one long act of return. The universe expands outward, yet its heart always yearns inward, seeking the same wholeness it began with. There are those who see the star as mere history, but its meaning lives far beyond record or religion. It is the living pulse of continuity, the echo of divine order humming beneath the noise of time. Every civilization that touched it, Jewish, Islamic, Christian, Hindu, saw a piece of its truth, but never the whole. Perhaps no one was meant to. Perhaps the star's power lies in its incompleteness, in the mystery it preserves rather than the answers it gives. For mystery, too, is sacred. It keeps the soul searching. And so long as humanity searches, the Magen David continues to fulfill its purpose. Even in the modern world, awash with technology and distraction, the star's light cuts through the digital haze. It glimmers in the logos of humanitarian aid, in art installations, in the jewelry of seekers who might not even know its origin. It has become a quiet guardian of meaning in an age that too often forgets meaning's worth. To trace its lines is to meditate on permanence in impermanence. The same geometry that once symbolized divine power now serves as a reminder that faith, in any form, is not about dogma but direction, a way to orient the human heart toward its center. And still, beneath its beauty, the star carries a lingering question, one that humanity has yet to answer fully. What if this symbol, found in galaxies and scriptures alike, was never meant to represent a single people, but the whole human design? What if the Magen David is not only the shield of David nor the seal of Solomon, but the very blueprint of creation, an eternal reminder that all forms of life are interwoven? In every upward striving there is a downward grace, in every descent the seed of ascent. The star does not belong to us, we belong to its pattern. In ancient times, priests and prophets believed the Magen David could summon divine protection. Perhaps it still does, not through magic, but through memory. When people look upon it, they remember that unity is possible. They recall that faith and knowledge are not enemies but reflections. In that remembrance lies protection, not from harm, but from forgetting who we are. The star shields the soul from despair by reminding it of its divine architecture. Its 6 points reach outward to the edges of the world, while its center remains still, whispering, "Return to balance, return to light." Some scholars claim that the universe itself hums in patterns of 6, the resonance of harmony that vibrates through matter and sound alike. Snowflakes, honeycombs, crystals, and even the orbital shapes of atoms follow the same symmetry. Perhaps the ancients, gazing upward, felt this rhythm intuitively and gave it form in the Magen David. In every age, humanity has sought to name what it feels but cannot see. The star, then, is our shared metaphor for divine design, a silent hymn carved in shape, reminding us that what we call God may simply be order too vast to comprehend, yet simple enough to draw with 2 triangles and a single heart. The future will continue to reinterpret the star. New generations will assign it new meanings, political, spiritual, personal, but its essence will remain unchanged. It will endure wars, outlast empires, and glow in the hands of artists and believers alike. Perhaps one day, when humanity finally looks beyond its divisions,